Alright, what's up? So, in honor of it being Amazon Prime Day, I had the thought of going through online and building a couple gaming PCs to suit multiple budgets for people. I think we're going to find a lot of deals online that we can use to make some gaming PCs that can fit a wide variety of budgets. So, my goal here is that I can target multiple budgets so that people who have varying amounts of money will be able to put together a gaming PC. Now, there are a few restrictions on that. I am not going to go below $200, and I'm not going to go above $1,500. And the reason for that is I don't believe that builds outside of those price ranges are really justifiable, and I'll get more into why I think that in a moment. So I just wanted to give that context. Lastly, before we get started, just know that these builds are what I put together, but they are not the be-all, end-all. You may very well find a better deal at some point, or you might be willing to shop around and do some bargain hunting. So you might find something a little bit better. These builds are supposed to be very customizable, and you can mix and match parts to fit your budget and fit the games that you want to play. So keep that in mind, that just because I choose certain parts or I find certain parts on websites, that doesn't mean that these are the only things you can use. You can use whatever fits your budget or whatever you want, depending on the games that you want to play. So with all that in mind, let's get started and let's get to our first PC build. So let's start with our first computer. For the first computer, I'm targeting the $200 to $400 range. Now, this is kind of the lowest end that I would recommend actually building a PC. Now, theoretically, we could go below $200 and we could go for like a Core 2 Duo machine, and we could get a Q6600 for $5 and maybe a 5770 for like $40. One of my favorite channels, Greenham Gaming, did a great video on how the 5770 is great value at 720p. But I decided against going for one of these, ultra budget builds, because at the end of the day, I feel like for that money that you'd be spending on it, you'd be better off going to get like a used Xbox 360 or something. You're not getting a lot of computer for your money. You're getting virtually no upgrade path, and you're pretty much limiting yourself to older games. Now, if you wanted to build a box that's really good for emulators, and just doing some like YouTube content consumption, that's a great idea, and it would definitely serve your needs just fine. But if you want to get into at least semi-modern gaming, you're going to have a bit of a budget, not less than $100. So with that in mind, the first computer build that I'm going to recommend is the $200 to $400 price range. With that money, we can get a lot of computer for that money. So with our first PC, what I found here is actually a pretty nice Dell Optiplex. This has a 3rd gen Core i5 at 3.2 gigahertz, 4 gigs of RAM, no hard drive included, but that's okay. We don't really need that. I'll go into why. But this is actually a pretty good little package right here for what you get for your money. So here we have a motherboard, a power supply, and a case, and included RAM. That's important. So we really only need to add storage and a graphics card to this if we want to get it up and running. Now, these power supplies, depending on how big of a graphics card you want, you might have to do a power supply upgrade. But typically, you can adapt these off to fit pretty low power cards, which is what I'm going to recommend that you put in there. So this is actually a great base. Now you can see we can get this for almost $40 and $30 shipping, so $70. And I have this in the side panel kind of showing the breakdown of our costs. It can vary depending on what you want, but this is kind of the lower end of what I would recommend that you get. These early Gen i5s, this is quad cores, 4 threads, and they can still game pretty well. They also do have the dedicated Intel QuickSync, which allows you to use one core dedicated for streaming. That's a positive if you want to get into some low-end streaming. Just keep in mind the settings might not be great, but you get what you pay for. So yeah, this is a pretty good base to work off of if you wanted to get into some, Counter-Strike, Rocket League, Fortnite. This is the kind of caliber, your esports games or your simple games. This is really what's going to enable you to get there. On the other hand, I also found something like this. This is $40 shipping, $110 base, so something like $150. That gets you an i7, 8 gigs of RAM, a 2 terabyte hard drive with some storage. So if you pay more money, you can get a few more bells and whistles that'll be nice for you. Store a larger library of games on here. So you have a lot of options there. But some things like this i7, they still have lots and lots of performance left in them. So it is a little bit older, but you're still getting a lot of performance for the money. SSD, this ADATA Ultimate, this is a 240 gig for $30. It's a pretty solid value. I believe this does have a DRAM cache in it. Read and write speeds are going to be great for SATA. With these older Optiplexes, you're kind of limited yourself to the SATA standard. These don't have NVMe. Obviously, this is before that standard was kind of around. So I guess lastly, that kind of brings us to getting a graphics card for it. And there are a lot of low-end options we can use. One is the 750 Ti. They don't support this with drivers anymore, but if we're playing, things like Counter-Strike, Fortnite, these kind of lower-end games that aren't necessarily the newest thing, you don't need the latest and greatest in drivers, and these can still function just fine. So the 750 Ti is a classic budget graphics card, which is still pretty solid. Something else like the 950, these can typically be had for around $70, as seen here. The 1050 Ti is another one. This is about 130, 145, something like that. And then if you really want to go on the high end, if you picked up one of these i7s, you could stretch and get a 1650 Super if you wanted on Newegg. At the time of this video, these are still in production, so you can still get this. These are a little bit pricey, though, compared to some of the other offers. But yeah, these are a couple of good solid graphics card options. And for between $200 and $400, you're getting a solid entry-level gaming PC. And if you have a budget that's that low, this is kind of the method of getting the most for your money if you're going to spend it that way. This is going to get you, maybe not quite as much as an Xbox Series X, but you can play a wider variety of games. You can use it for more purposes. And honestly, with how much the scalping is still bad, this might actually even be cheaper than that. So it's definitely a great option if you want. Throwing graphics cards and pre-built systems is kind of a tried and true method of budget PC gaming, and it's still very true today. So I think that this is a pretty solid option. So that's our $200 to $400 budget computer. Let's say we have a little bit more budget to play with, and we can go between $600 to $750. Well, that's where things get a little bit more interesting. I was able to go on Newegg, and with all the deals that I found, I was able to throw together a really solid build for under $600. So I think you guys are going to like this a lot. As usual, I'm going to have the prices linked in the, I'm going to have the prices posted in the sideboard. You can see them on a spreadsheet. So starting off, we have the i3-10100F. It is a couple generations old, but it's still a very solid chip. You do get 4 cores. No onboard graphics, so you will need a graphics card, but for $78 if you want to buy new, you can't deny that this thing does have a lot of value. It does come with a cooler in the box, so there's that. And yeah, it's pretty solid cooler all around. 4 cores is going to be good for gaming. For our motherboard, we have the Gigabyte DS3H B560M. Standard, very plain motherboard for the CPU. Obviously, we have our M.2 support. We do have 4 RAM slots, so if you want to upgrade that in the future, that's there. If you want to get a more powerful CPU as well, this can support. I believe this can actually support 11th gen. Yep, 11th gen CPUs for Intel. So yeah, not much else to say. Pretty standard micro ATX motherboard. DDR4 RAM. There's a lot of options on here, but this T-Force stuff was $56. I often see this brand T-Force on promo a lot. So I mean, it's 16 gigs, DDR4, 3200 megahertz. I mean, with RAM, typically the brand doesn't matter because all the chips come from the same places, same like 2 or 3 companies, so don't worry about it. Yeah, I would say that this is a pretty solid purchase. 16 gigs for $50 is pretty good. So that's going to be our RAM option. For the case, I actually couldn't find a lot of good cases on Newegg, which is very strange. Typically, there's a lot of good case options. But this Rosewill FBM X2, it's not very glamorous, but it's going to be a case, and it's going to get the job done. It does look like we're pretty gimped as far as airflow in the front. We do have a little bit of a vent on there, but it's not going to be the most airflow case. But we are running pretty low powered hardware, so I wouldn't say, not too big of a need to worry about that. But it does support micro ATX and mini ITX, so you won't be able to fit a full-size motherboard in here, but that should be okay. So that's our case. It's more for the price, $44, and it's actually on sale, which I did not realize. But yeah, that's our case choice. Now for the power supply, this was actually pretty straightforward. It's just EVGA 400 watts. It's pretty simple, non-modular, so cable management's going to be a bit of a bear, but that's okay. It's EVGA, it's a gold certified, so it's a good brand, and it's gold rated for efficiency, so it's going to be a solid power supply. EVGA and Seasonic are my 2 favorite power supply brands personally, so if I was building a computer, this is the brand that I would use. So for $50, this is pretty great. And you can also bring this forward for future builds as long as they can remain within that power budget. Fingers crossed that NVIDIA's GPUs are going to be able to, you can have a $500 watt power supply in them with how power hungry these GPUs are becoming. Now we get to storage. This motherboard does support M.2, so I figured 1 terabyte M.2 SSD would be fine. This is Intel 660p. I actually have the same exact SSD in one of my workstations for college, my programming PC, and it's great. It's great. It's exactly what you want. Not the fastest, not the most efficient, not the biggest capacity, but it does everything well that you would want from an SSD. So that's really all you can ask for. And at $70 for 1 terabyte of SSD storage, it's actually a pretty good deal. Compared to other brands like a Samsung or Micron or something like that, this is a pretty solid value. So that was a pretty straightforward choice. And then lastly, the GPU. To keep this under $600 was pretty hard, but I did go with the 1650 Super. You could go for something like a 1660 Super or a 1660 Ti. That would obviously bump the price up, probably about $100, $150 depending on what you get. But this is still a pretty solid card and should do 1080p gaming just fine. For lower end games, you can probably get some Warzone on with this type of thing. So yeah, but that's basically the build that I had for the $600 to $700 range. These are some ideas that you can do for that. Now, I do believe that if you wanted to go Ryzen, you could. The Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 3000 series are going on sale. You could get it for a cheaper price, but I just went Intel for the sake of, I know that they're pretty cheap and affordable right now, especially the older generations, and this is what I was able to find and throw together for this budget. Alright, so now is my $1,000 PC. I like to say that this is pretty much the sweet spot for any computer. Now, admittedly, the components that I picked for this, I don't really think constitute a $1,000 computer. In my opinion, it should be more of an $800 computer, but computer parts are overpriced right now, especially with inflation and supply chain issues and everything like that. But as of today, at the time of this video, I think that this is one of the best values that you can get in terms of your price range. So if you wanted to build a computer today, I would recommend the $1,000 mark. I think that this is probably the best spot. And what you'll notice is when we go through these parts, a lot of the components are actually the same as our $600 to $700 tier computer. That's because when we pick a lot of quality components, since the components we get are really good, we can bring a lot of those forward. So a lot of the components that we used in our budget system are going to be good enough for us to bring forward to a better one. So with that, let's do our $1,000 build. So to start off with, I chose the Ryzen 5600X just because you can't really match this in terms of the value that it has. This is pretty much a tried and true CPU. You know, you got 6 cores and 12 threads. It's unlocked, so you can overclock it if you'd like. And it pretty much has everything that you need. Again, stock heatsink included. And AMD's heatsinks are obviously very nice, very good, and they'll do a fine job of cooling it. If you want to overclock very heavily, you might want to spend another $20 or $30 on an aftermarket air cooler. So yeah, and to pair with it, we have a Gigabyte B550 motherboard. This is a full-size ATX board. Has 2 PCI 16X slots, looks like 2 M.2 slots, so it does have quite a bit of expansion. You can put anything that you would want on it. Pretty standard, not much explanation needed. It should work very well with our 5600X. I actually kept the RAM exactly the same from our $600 to $700 build. This 16 gigs of T-Force RAM, I think it's great. If you wanted to get 2 of these kits and go up to 32 gigs, you can definitely do that. You know, RAM is actually one of the things that's really sanely priced right now, at least DDR4 is. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. I got a nicer case. I splurged on the Corsair 4000D just because it's a great case with great features, great airflow in it, plenty of room to put all the hardware that you would ever want in it. And it's a case that, again, once you buy this one case, you can use it for tons of builds in the future. You know, it's one of those things you don't have to buy a new one. You can just keep using this one over and over again. So, you know, it's one of those things that making those smart purchase decisions is going to pay off for you. Power supply, I did bump the power supply a little bit. Nicer EVGA 650 watt. This one's not gold, it's bronze, but it is modular, so you know it's a little treat. You know, cable management's going to be a little bit easier, a little bit nicer. So I think that that's great. And in terms of the storage, I kept this one the same Intel SSD. This should be perfectly fine. Storage is one of those things that's really kind of personal. Are you the kind of person who you have to have all of your games downloaded right now, or are you okay with only playing a few games at a time and having only a couple games on your SSD at a time? That's for you to decide. But for the budget and just for practicality, I think that 1 terabyte of SSD space is definitely sufficient. At least it should be for most people. And then finally, for our graphics card, I was able to get in an RTX 3060. This is actually the card that I use currently as a daily driver, and it's fantastic. You got 12 gigs of VRAM. It has the NVENC encoder that's really good for streaming, and you know, all of the you know, like DLSS and all of the new bells and whistles that NVIDIA is marketing with these RTX cards. So this is a very good gaming card, and great for upper level gaming. You know, this is we're starting to get into like a 1440p type of experience here. So I think it's great. It's a great value. So yeah, this is what I would go with for a $1,000 computer build as of this moment. And yeah, I'm really happy to see that we were able to, you know, we can actually get graphics cards now that we can actually stay within these budgets and not have it be, you know, completely overboard. So yeah. Okay, now we have the last computer that I'm going to be doing for this video. Now, the last price point that I wanted to hit was $1,500, and that's the last price that I wanted to hit because anything over $1,500 I don't really think is justifiable for a computer. I think that's kind of the point where if you go any higher than that, it's kind of diminishing returns. I don't think that there's anything that you need that would ever cost you more than $1,500 in terms of a gaming PC. Now, as you can see by the price, I did overshoot that margin by a bit, but I will explain why, and I'll explain why you don't necessarily need to. This build assumes that you do have a bit of money to spend, and maybe you can play around with the budget a little bit more with a little bit more freedom. But I definitely kind of overindulged in some nice quality of life things, and I'll be explaining those and you can decide for yourself. But the $1,500 price point is definitely achievable here. Don't let that number in the corner fool you. The $1,500 is definitely something that we can do. So let's start off. The new Intel generation is great, so I thought that this 12700K would be a fantastic high-end chip. You get 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, 12 cores total, and I think it's 20 threads, I think. Yeah, 20 threads. For a CPU, it's fantastic. It overclocks, which is awesome. In order to go with it, I got this Z690P board from ASUS. Should be great for overclocking. As you can see, we have plenty of connectivity for everything that you would ever want. The power delivery is good. Good cooling on the VRMs. All of your side I/O, everything that you need. It actually includes a heatsink for the SSD, which is pretty cool. Now, in order to cool this thing, if you do want to overclock, I'm assuming that if you're spending this much money, you're probably wanting to overclock your chip a little bit. I did get a Noctua NHU12S to go with it. This will do a pretty good job of keeping it cool. Noctua coolers are typically pretty great. If you don't want it, you could get the locked variant and then just get a stock cooler. That's fine too. But if you want to go with the unlocked version, you would definitely need to get an aftermarket cooler. But again, you don't have to. It's just a matter of, these builds are highly configurable depending on how much money you have and how much you want to play with. So it all depends on what your needs are and what you want from your PC. In terms of RAM, this is something that I did kind of splurge on. I went for 32 gigs of this RGB Corsair stuff, $120, 3600 megahertz, which is very nice. So yeah, this is a pretty solid kit of RAM, and the price does reflect that. But if you want to go back to the T-Force stuff, the 16 gig stuff, for $50, you can definitely do that. That is a way to save some money there. And especially, Intel is not as strict on RAM timings as AMD is. So, Ryzen likes really fast RAM. Intel, not as strict on that. So, depending on what you go with, you can definitely save some money on the RAM. And I just went with the Intel version. If you wanted to go with, maybe a 5900X from AMD, a Ryzen 5900X or a 5800X, you can certainly do that as well. Yeah, you might be able to find those a little bit better prices because the Intel is pretty hot right now. So it all depends on what you want to do and if you are willing to shop around. I did keep the Corsair 4000D just because it's such a great case. And again, it's going to be, if you buy this case now, you won't need to upgrade it. You can bring it forward with all of your future builds, and it's just a great case all around for whatever you want. So I'm deciding to keep it here. Now, for the power supply, everything I could find says that we would probably want a 650 watt. I did bump it up just in case. This is a gold 750 watt. It's also modular, so that's nice. Nice cable management, and it should supply plenty of juice for the CPU and GPU. So yeah, I'm sticking with the theme of EVGA. I don't know why, but EVGA just makes great power supplies, and all of my EVGA power supplies have worked great for years. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. And EVGA is just a solid brand. I did splurge also on the storage. I went with the Samsung 970 EVO Plus, the 2 terabyte model, just to give it a little bit more space. Again, if you are comfortable with only the 1 terabyte, you can go with the 1 terabyte version. The 970 EVO Plus does have a 1 terabyte version. You could drop down to the Intel SSD that I showed in some of the previous builds. That's fine too. Again, it all depends on what you want, where you want your performance to be, and how much you're willing to spend. So it's all configurable relative to what your wallet tells you. And then last but not least is our graphics card. And I wanted to fit a 3070 in here, and I was able to do it. So this is the most affordable 3070 I was able to find. This one's from Gigabyte, and $579. So it's not cheap, but this is about as high-end as I would recommend for going in terms of GPU. This will be able to play whatever you want. We're talking 1440p/4K gaming, solid frame rates. It can pretty much do whatever you want. So yeah, I think that's going to pretty much round out our build. Again, it's gonna when you have this $1,500 price point, you probably have a little bit more money to spend, so you can kind of take this as just sort of a baseline and kind of gauge where you do and do not want to go. And kind of to elaborate on my point a little bit more, here we see the 5800X Ryzen is actually $270, and it's on promo. So you get 8 cores from Ryzen. Now the Intel that I showed you was $350 for 12 cores, but again, that is like $80, $75 less. So that is a way to save some money if you want to go Ryzen as well. Now I do believe that this will not come with a stock cooler, so you do need to get an aftermarket cooler for it. But again, it's just a matter of where do you want to spend your money, where do you want to save your money, and if you want to drop down your CPU, you might be able to have some more money to put towards a better GPU, and it's just a matter of you making those trade-offs. And there you have it. That is my take on building a computer at multiple different price points, hopefully one that can suit almost everyone out there. And this is my first time doing this, so let me know what you think. Obviously, if you want to spend some more time and shop around, you can get better prices and better deals. Buying used is certainly an option. For some of the higher end builds, I didn't even bother looking at used prices, but that's definitely an avenue to go if you want. So do let me know what you think of this video. If you found it helpful, this is, again, it's not intended to be concrete. I'm not expecting people to just duplicate these builds verbatim. This is more of a guide for you to go out and just explore and kind of use this as a guide for building your own computer based on your budget and what your needs are. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed actually putting multiple builds together, and it was really fun. I think once the prices go down a little bit more, I would probably want to do this again. So yeah, I think I'll make a follow-up to this at some point in the future. But do let me know what you think and if there's any improvements I could make, because again, first time doing that. But yeah, if you like the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and be sure to comment. Comments are very helpful. And with that, I will see you guys next time.